So recently you must have heard in the news that the Canadian government has now decided to enlist permanent residents into the Canadian Armed Forces. Let me first tell you who are permanent residents. Suppose you go to any country to work and then you have plans to settle down in that country. You basically have two options. One is permanent resident status and the other one is citizenship status. A permanent resident is someone who has been given permanent resident status by the Canadian government, but he or she is not a Canadian citizen. To become a Canadian citizen, that is the next step. First, you have to be a permanent resident, and after that, you have to fulfill certain criteria to be eligible to become a Canadian citizen. To get your permanent residency status, it does not take that much of time compared to getting citizenship status. And one more important aspect is that, as a permanent resident, you do not have the right to vote in elections. Only citizens of a country has the right to vote. So now that you have understood the difference between a permanent resident and a citizen, let's try to understand what the Canadian government is up to when they have announced that they will now enlist permanent residents into the Canadian Armed Forces. See, the first thing that you have to understand is that being part of a country's military is not only a job, it is also a service full of selfless act, wherein patriotism and loyalty has to be the utmost quality. Being part of the military means you also have to give up your life in the service of your nation. That is why your mind, heart and soul has to be fully devoted towards the service of your nation. Only then joining the military makes sense. Of course, there are people who look at it from an ordinary job point of view, but then the majority has to have the perception that I just told you about. Now, if a government of a country decides to open up the military recruitment to the people of other country, or you can say outsiders or immigrants, then I don't need to tell you this, but you can sense that this kind of policy by the government reflects properties of liberalism. And don't be surprised, Canada is currently led by a liberal party. I have said this in one of my previous videos. Canada is a liberal country, however, they are part of the left liberal ecosystem. Liberalism alone cannot develop until it is supported by an ecosystem of which it is a part and shares common ground. And I have also said this, Canada listens to the United States in every aspect, be it economically, militarily, everything. Yes, Canada might have its own flag, and people may say it's a sovereign country, but they don't decide their foreign policies themselves. Even Canada's internal policies, to a lot extent, is very much controlled by the US government. Have you seen the strength of Canadian Armed Forces? It is roughly around 70 to 75,000 personnel. Such a vast country with tiny population and the strength of their military is almost non-existent. Do you think that is called a sovereign country? Canada only exists because the United States allows it to do so. And if at all Canada ever goes against the wishes of the United States, it will no longer be a country. But nevertheless, on face value, yes, Canada has its own flag and it is an independent country. So basically the strength of Canadian military is almost non-existent. And their own people, that is the young Canadian citizens, are not willing to join the armed forces. And they are also not very fit mentally as well as physically according to military standards. As per the reports of Canadian Institutes of Health Research, school surveys in Canada have reported that up to 60% of students in grades 7 to 9 reported lifetime use of various substances. In Ontario, Canada, 75% of youth in grade 12 reported lifetime alcohol use, 26% cannabis and 26% nicotine. And it is a fact, everyone knows it. If you are on some kind of drug or any substance, or even if you drink regular alcohol, it lowers your reaction rate, your cognitive level decreases, and that affects your ability to take decisions. Plus, we all know that a healthy youthful population is the key reason behind any country's economic growth. For Canada, unfortunately, vast majority of young Canadians are moving away from hopefulness towards hopelessness. That is the reason the government had to roll out such a policy. Even in terms of maintaining military, Canada has to now rely on permanent residents instead of citizens. United States, Canada and Western European countries, today wherever they are, it is because of immigrants. From farming, fishing to manufacturing, healthcare, transportation sector, these countries rely on immigrants. Immigration policy is actually based on the concept of never-ending growth. To keep the economy running, you need human resource, and that too low-cost, skilled human resource. Immigration policies are not at all designed to fill up empty lands. It's not like some countries feeling lonely, hence they decided to invite some people from other countries, come and share your life with us and we all will live happily. It is not like that. Although they try to sell it and market it that way, in order to attract immigrants, But it is not the case. So always remember, the primary goal behind inviting immigrants is to keep the economic engines of a country running. Since last 2 years, because of the pandemic, almost every country's economy has been badly hit. Inflation is high, so naturally the next step is economic recovery. Keeping that in mind, Canada has increased its intake of immigrants. Plus, we have also heard in the news that Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Sean Fraser, has said Canada is increasing its intake of immigrants into the country to as many as 475,000 by 2024. If you look at Canada, United States and European countries, they have huge national debt. Who do you think have to pay the national debt of a country? It's the citizens, right? Any kind of national debt has to be socialized among the general public, more specifically on the working population. Suppose a certain percentage of native workers retire every year. That would require more new workers to stay in the workforce so that they can continue paying taxes, and with that tax money, pension and healthcare can be supported. Now, if the working population of Canada or United States or any European country is not enough to support old retired population, then that will rapidly deplete Social Security Fund of these countries, leaving older Americans, Canadians and Europeans unable to access the support they invested in their whole careers. So, to support their healthcare and pension funds, these countries desperately need immigrants, and that too young immigrants, so that these young immigrants can take the load of these so-called developed countries' national debt on their shoulders. That is why the Western countries, they always advocate for democracy, equality, liberal values, etc. etc. They are marketing and promoting heavily to attract people from different countries, majorly from Asian countries. Come here, you can have a good life, work here, have a good lifestyle, you can do whatever you want to. American dream, Canadian dream, European dream, everything is being commercially sold with proper government policies. Because this ideology sounds very attractive to young minds. In fact, this idea of making permanent residents now part of Canadian military will also majorly benefit many Indians. Because Indians account for almost 19% of the total number of people who immigrated to the Canada between 2016 and 2021. Indians will be automatically eligible for joining the Canadian Armed Forces. Today, if you notice, the global political landscape has changed dramatically after Russia-Ukraine conflict. Although the Western countries, which includes United States, Canada and European countries, they do not openly admit this, but they have a growing concern with respect to their own military strength. After all, the leftist ideology of liberalism, socialism and neo-communism have never regarded military as an important pillar of a nation. They have always regarded military as an unnecessary expenditure. I'm not saying they hate military. If given a choice, they would spend less on military. Plus, ideologically also, if you see, left-leaning people hate anyone who displays characters like discipline, patriotism, nationalism, honor, loyalty, love towards cultural heritage, traditionalists. They don't like those people who display these characters. But now these Western countries are realizing the importance of having a strong military. But then you also have to realize that the left ideology has caused so much harm to the society. Today, the citizens of the Western countries have low fertility levels, they are not physically and mentally fit, most of the youth is on substance, their mental health is declining, young people are facing anxiety and having suicidal tendencies. In such a scenario, immigrants become prime candidates for the military, as they typically arrive in Canada during their young working age years, where they are likely to be more physically active. Now, here also I will point out a flaw. You can make immigrants join military by giving good pay, allowance, making the process easy. But how are you going to buy loyalty and integrity? These qualities cannot be bought. They are intrinsic to soil. But then I am sure about the fact that the Western countries' governments will find a way to buy loyalty and integrity. Or maybe they will create a new format of looking at things. And it is these kind of radical experiments and ideas that brainwashes an entire generation. And not just the people of their own country, but also from other continents. And once these radical experiments and ideas are propagated through media outlets and other forms of soft power, certain section of any society will get brainwashed, that is for sure. And that is when the Western countries will point their finger across other countries around the world of human rights violations and other crimes. This is the typical style of Western democracy. As an Indian, I'm just concerned about the fact that every year many young Indians go to Canada for better economic opportunity. Now let's assume certain percentage of these Indians will choose to join the Canadian military. I hope that does not have some serious consequences. Because going to a particular country for work is one thing, and becoming a member of the defense forces is another thing. I'm not saying that we don't have such example in the past. Of course, there are Indians who are part of many countries' security forces. But now if it starts to happen in large scale, that will have certain consequences. And not to forget, Canada has become a breeding ground for Khalistan. So all these kind of new modern radical experiments and ideas create a big problem for many countries that do not follow the similar style of functioning. Because every country has its own way of functioning, their own culture, their own belief system, their own civilizational pace, which gets hampered and undermined. And that's not a good thing. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you for watching it.